So happy to be here with all of you. Why don't we do some quick introductions? Catherine, you want to start?
I am Catherine Allen, and I'm new to Boostlingo, but not new to the profession. And working inside Boostlingo now as a training specialist and a language access specialist, but here to share whatever I can about 30 years of working as a freelancer. And
Welcome to our webinar. I'm Caroline. I think a lot of you already know me. Been with Boostlingo for about 4.5 years now, and built out what we are calling the Boostlingo Professional Interpreter Network. And yeah, Maddie is our host. She's also the communications director at Boostlingo and has a lot of freelance experience, having been in content and communications for a long time. So she has that perspective to lend to us when it comes to professional persona.
Awesome. And we are going to slide along into the rest of our presentation, but I wanted to go ahead and clarify for those of you who maybe aren't in the BPEN on the call. Boostlingo is a technology company. We partner with language service organizations to create the Boostlingo Professional Interpretation Network. We do not hire interpreters. We do not send referrals to the language service companies. We are purely partners with them. That being said, we've worked with a lot of language service companies, so we know what they're looking for on those resumes. And Catherine and Caroline both have industry experience outside of working at Boostlingo. So we're really happy to share those takes with you today.
And we do audit the interpreters on the platform, so we see a lot of resumes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, during our quality assurance strict workflows, we look at interpreter resumes that are provided to us by language service companies. So the agenda for today, which we are going to fly through, we're going to define some terms. We're going to look at what your resume should portray, the questions you want to answer, and we're also going to talk about what your resume should not say. We're going to look at your professional persona, which is basically who you are online to other people based with your professional presence. We're going to talk about professional associations, and then we're going to talk about communication best practices. And there is a lot to go through today. We're going to try and speed through, but we will also be sending out this deck and sending out the recording. So thanks for joining us. So we're going to answer first, what does resume mean in the US context, and why do you need a resume? I think to kind of delve into this, we're going to go into the definitions first. A resume is 1 page per decade of experience. This is your overview. Catherine has spoken before that 15 seconds is the scan on your resume. You want somebody to understand what you can do for them in 15 seconds or less. Whereas a curriculum vitae, both Caroline and Catherine have made those. Caroline, do you want to kind of explain what yours is and how it differs?
Yeah, having done my master's program abroad in Europe, I'm familiar with, having to put a CB basically represents the full history of your academic credentials. So that the length of that kind of document can vary, of course, just depending on how much educational background you have. Whereas a resume, which is what we're talking about in this use case, represents a concise picture of your skills and qualifications for a specific position. So the length of the resume tends to be shorter and is dictated by your years of experience.
Yeah, I was going to say, just in terms of hiring managers, that 15 seconds is it really is important that your resume catch people's attention in that 15 seconds, because for people scanning potential job applicants, the first look and that first impression can mean the difference between them giving it a deeper look or just putting it into the discard pile.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about what's important to include as those eye-catching bullets. And the difference for a biography, the resume can inform your biography. Whenever I'm writing those for our executives, if they're getting an award or something, they send me their resume as part of the biography process. I might include some of those accomplishments, but your biography is your story, right? It's your 2 paragraphs underneath your picture that gives kind of an overview of who you are as a person, not just your accomplishments. So we spoke about this a little on the last slide. We'll go a little bit deeper into it. A resume is for telling your qualifications in a condensed form, letting an employer know what you can do for them, right? Like I've said before, your resume is your entry ticket to the process of being hired. So you're going to present it to them and you're going to get to go on the journey to try and get hired, right? Tips for your resume, we're going to dive a little bit more into these. you need to be able to do what you say you can do on day one. And Caroline, I really loved what you were talking about as a safety issue with truth telling in
Yeah.
the interpreting space.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's going to be obvious if you show up to an interpreting session about automotive technology, having said that you have expertise in that terminology and you don't. Um, when it comes to liability, and especially in the medical legal settings, it's really risky for an interpreter or linguist to say that they're qualified in something that they are not, and then enter into the session and deer in headlights, not know what's going on. That could mean sending the wrong person to jail. That could mean sending someone to the wrong surgery. These are, life and death examples, but I hope that they demonstrate how important it is for you to be accurate on your resume.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the life and death examples is super relevant because a lot of our interpreters really are stepping into those situations every day. And Catherine, I love what you have been talking about with writing your resume in English and why it's super important. Can you kind of go further on that about why we need to think about spoken versus written word here?
Well, first of all, I think it's a good point that regardless of what your native language is, somebody else should read your resume for spell checking, because once you've looked at a document too much, standard rule in translation, your eyes don't catch everything. So whether you're a native English speaker or not, you should have somebody else read your resume and make sure everything is correct. But in terms of if you are a non-native English speaker and you're looking for interpreting work, often we are more proficient as interpreters with our language skills and we speak better English than we write, because it really is sort of two separate learning domains inside a language. So do have somebody edit and help make your resume sound more natural in English if that's an issue with your language proficiency, because you may be selling yourself short. You may be more proficient speaking than you are in writing, but your writing is going to make the employer sort of wonder about it, even if you have the proficiency tests and everything. So definitely, do everything you can to have the resume sound native in English.
Absolutely. And if we're thinking about 15 seconds, one of the things that will automatically eject somebody from the reading process is any sort of grammatical errors, spelling errors. Hiring managers notice that right away. And a lot of times it automatically gets you rejected no matter how qualified you are from the process, just because of the nature of hiring, right?
Yeah.
And Caroline, you had a really good example earlier about run-on sentences.
Yeah, I think that as interpreters, obviously, we interpret meaning for meaning. But when it comes to a written work, and especially something that's your resume that you're putting out there for potential employers, it's very important to make sure that the language you're using is as concise as possible as well. Not only because then it will fit in the 1 or 2 pages, but also because then the person that you are applying for a job with, it makes their life easier. They don't have to read through all these run-on sentences to understand why you're qualified for this job. You took the effort to make your language concise, so it would be easier for them to understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in English, we speak in run-on sentences pretty much primarily. That's how we speak to each other, but we notice them in writing, for sure. And then let's
Yes.
talk through your relevant experience for the job. We're going to dive a little bit further into what to include on a resume. So we just kind of want to do an overview of what we mean by that. Catherine, can you kind of say what experience is relevant here?
Of course, it depends on where you are in your career, and maybe all of your experience is relevant because you're newer or you've been at it for a long time and you do have to pick and choose. But interpreters, there's a couple of things. One, anything that has related to your linguistic skill set and that shows that she's lived in abroad, she studied abroad, or he's been here or there, and you can understand, okay, well, that's going to create a real fluency there. But also volunteer experience interpreting or translating is experience, and that's one of the big issues and differences in American resumes than a lot of countries, is that we prioritize experience actually often over education. And so someone can show a deep level of experience, paid or unpaid, volunteer or not. It's experience is experience, and it shows the skill set. And also the final thing I'd say is if, what many interpreters, most interpreters in this country are immigrants, and most immigrants come in having studied or had a previous work life that they may not be able to replicate here. But we want to see that, because that tells us, oh, you were a medical assistant, you were a dentist, and you want to be a medical interpreter. That says a lot, right? That in terms of what you will know. So
Right.
you don't need the kitchen sink. Not all your hobbies, but we definitely want to know what your knowledge base is, right?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Great point. And then we will kind of fly over this because this is a little bit self-explanatory, but make sure to list your languages and what level of proficiency you're at. We're looking for differences in consecutive and simultaneous because those will get different assignments. We've touched on this before, but specializations, I think this kind of goes into your work experience, but Caroline, maybe you could talk about when to use specializations besides conference, legal, and medical, and what that can mean in the resume context.
Yeah, and I think it's just because the modern interpreting profession, as Catherine has alluded to prior, is such a young profession when it comes to specialization and standardization, especially at least in the United States, and I mean everywhere else too, but some countries have a leg up on us for sure when it comes to standardizing interpreting. But basically, the ones that we obviously prioritize at Boostlingo, just because those are the #1 demand, are medical and then legal. And then also we have a court specialization that is under the umbrella of legal interpreting, obviously, but you have to have actual courtroom experience. When it comes to other specializations that we are looking to build out, education is #1, I would say. And that one is one we are building out to support different it could be simultaneous or consecutive. So if you do have any experience working in an education setting, it's something we would want you to put on your resume.
Catherine, anything to add there?
Emphasize what Caroline's saying. This is a young profession. It's all over the map in terms of its maturity. Some areas have matured sooner, like medical interpreting and court interpreting are more mature in the United States than educational interpreting, but there are probably more educational interpreters actually working in the United States than there are in medical interpreters, just by the sheer number of school districts we have. So that's definitely, so even if it's not formal, you should put it on. If you've got experience in it, social services, finance, business, religion, where you should put it down. If you've got extensive experience in an area, consider it an area that you've specialized in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And this is a quote from our own Miss Caroline. I know things about interpreters I didn't hire that I don't know about my own friends. And it segues very nicely into what not to put onto your resume.
Yeah, and this is not meant to be just a critique of anybody. This is just us giving you some tips to at least make your resume fit more of the U.S. context specifically. And so, as I was quoted prior, we do get a lot of resumes from interpreters that have information on them that is just not not pertinent, but also too much information. In the U.S., we have laws that encourage an environment of anti-discrimination, and so we not only don't want to, but should not know your gender, how many kids you have, what you look like, your waist size. Yes, I've seen it on a resume. And just a personal identifying information that is not relevant to the qualifications of the job.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
And
I would
Catherine,
say even, yeah, and I was just going to say that I know, I'm having lived abroad as well, that many countries, the norm is that you put in a picture, and that you include a lot of personal information, and that's what's expected. So this is just a really brief webinar, but if you're confused about that, Google is our friend, and it's easy to Google and find out, what the employment laws are around that. Employers are not allowed to ask these questions. They can't know whether you're pregnant or not. They shouldn't know whether you're divorced or not. None of that is relevant for the resume. It's supposed to be highlighting your experience, and you're supposed to be hired based on merit, not on anything about your personal life. So.
Great. Yeah, we want to hire you for what you can do and not for who you are, which is an interesting break, I know, from a lot of countries.
Well, for who you are, but not, we don't, the idea is not to get an immediate, bias coming into play. It's a way to try and
exactly
filter out, bias to the
you are on paper, I guess, versus who
Yeah.
you are once we start chatting. Yeah. Awesome. And this is unique to interpreters. As a freelancer in communication, obviously, a portfolio is something that we do. It contains a lot of projects that you've worked on and things like that. But I was interested to find out about the interpreter portfolio. I'd love to kind of dive into what should be included in that portfolio. The proof of language proficiency. Caroline, what are you looking for proof of language proficiency? Is this a test? Is this a certificate?
It's a test, and there's different companies or organizations that offer language proficiency exams, and we have some that we would recommend that we can send to the group after the call with on this in addition to the slide deck. But yeah, there are different for lack of a word, barometers for language proficiency that we recognize, including the ILR scale, as well as the some of the other proficiency metrics that are used not just in the United States. So we can provide more detail on that with the slide deck.
And Catherine, let's talk about training certificates. So this is not just for those, this is a place where you do have those 4-hour courses as well as those 40-hour courses, right? You want all of that in the portfolio.
So the idea of a portfolio and how you present a portfolio, you could summarize it on a resume, and then you could actually have, we haven't gotten there yet, but some kind of online listing or short website. But the point of this is that this profession is young. We can't say Catherine Allen, RN, I'm a registered nurse, and everybody accepts what that means. I can't say Catherine Allen, I've got my teacher's certificate, and every state, one way or another, recognizes what that means and will tell me where I can and can't work. The field is not regulated that way. And so the only way employers have to really evaluate your full skill set is for you to show it. So unlike what doctors or mechanics even have to do. So you want to show what you've done to build up proof of your language proficiency, how much training have you had. And yes, if you've had 25 4-hour short courses, you're not going to want to list all 25. You're going to want to say, you might add up the hours and say total of 80 hours of medical interpreter terminology or something along. You could just help your employer understand what you've received training in, right? And so that's really the point of the portfolio. It's because we don't have a universal certification that everybody can take and show.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we will talk a little bit more about this later on in the webinar, but this all needs to live in one place. I have a website that's just myname.com, and that has my portfolio and my biography. All of it lives together. So whenever I'm doing a resume or something along that line, I can just put that website name in the place where all of those certificates would send. Right. And so this is what we're thinking about whenever we say all in one place. This will really help to condense your resume, and you might want to have, big highlights on the resume of these certificates, but then you can send them to a place where they can see all of it. And then, like we're saying, you can create a link online. So we're actually going to move nicely into this later when we talk about LinkedIn, but wanted to give a little bit more pro tips on the resume before we finish up this section. So like we mentioned earlier, 1 page per 10 years of experience. That can usually mean that you shorten the description for maybe some of your jobs if they're not super relevant, but you want to show that you have the soft skills. For example, I love whenever people have service industry experience, because that to me says they have the soft skills of being able to talk to people and keep customers happy, right? But I don't need you to give me 6 lines about what you did as a waiter. You can say that you were a waiter for X amount of years. That's a great way to
And
shorten.
people will understand. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really great way. Shorthand is a great way to shorten that experience. If there are jobs that you just took as a gig and you don't need to put it on there, for example, I was a Lyft driver for 2 years. I don't put that on my resume because it was driving around and I don't do a lot of that in my job here, right? So I wouldn't, you can pick and choose what you put onto the resume. And Catherine, I'd love for you to talk about this paid experience versus unpaid experience.
Got it a little bit, but I just think I'm going to highlight more. I mean, I'm going to reiterate that in the US, the experience is what people are looking for more than anything.
Mhm.
So a lot of people will say, oh, well, that was just volunteer experience. That doesn't count as job experience, or I can't show a work time between it. But categorize there's lots of ways to organize your resumes, but you can definitely do it under experience categories. So like project management, and maybe your project management is that you sit on the board for community events and you're regularly put on, community dinners 5 times a year or something like that. I mean, you've got experience in managing events in that sense, even if you didn't get paid for it. And on the interpreting side, if you're regularly interpreting, I wouldn't say really informally in the community, but if you are actually interpreting in a volunteer way for a nonprofit or for a women's shelter or something along those lines, should include that experience, because it shows that you have been in those settings and have had to navigate them. So it gives us a lot of information.
Yeah, that's great. And we've touched on all of the rest of this, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. But we will also send the slide deck, no typos, 15 seconds. And just as a last note, present tense for your current job, past tense for past jobs. You want it to reflect your lived experience. Awesome. And we're going to move on to professional persona. So you have your resume, that's your ticket for entry. And now whenever people are interested in you, what are they going to find online? First, they're going to look for your professional headshot. um, this is it seems like such a silly one, but it's really important. Your professional headshot is how people first get to know you as a person. It communicates a lot. I have people in our company that the first thing I did whenever I started at Boostlingo was I made them get a professional headshot done because of the way that their picture presented them online. Um, have somebody else take it, right? If it's a selfie, make it look like somebody else take it, right? Don't have your arm hanging out in the picture. Do as much as you can to make it look like you sat down for somebody to take it. No mirror pics. Basically, we're not making a picture for Instagram, right? We're making it for a professional setting. Catherine, I think you said you got your headshot done for $40.
Yeah, I had my headshot. The benefit of belonging to a professional association, when you go to conferences, often they'll have somebody, a photographer in the corner, who's charging $25 to $50 to do a professional headshot, because for them it's volume and they get a lot of customers. The last conference I was at, I updated my headshot and it was $40, and I think I got about 100 shots that I got to pick from off of
That's
that.
great.
So it doesn't have to be really complicated, right? And lots of people, our cameras are now amazing. If you just set yourself up with good lighting, with a neutral background, and dress how you want to dress. I mean, this is not hard to do anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said, you don't want alcohol or drugs in the picture. This is a business profile. And also, you don't want to crop people out. This is a picture of you. This is not a picture of you and somebody else. I think part of the reason we say that is because it communicates that you went out of your way to take this picture, right? It shows a level of care and thought that you wanted to get this done. Whereas if you're just repurposing a picture that you already had with somebody else in it and you just crop it, it can seem like you didn't go out of your way to make sure you had this. And so that's really why you want to avoid the crop out.
Great point.
We're going to talk about LinkedIn. So, Catherine, we are very big on LinkedIn here. I really love that you pointed out the 445,000 interpreter profiles. Can you say a little bit more about how the profession has come to live on LinkedIn?
No, I mean, it's, well, Caroline can speak to this as well. How do you find interpreters? And the interpreters are the pipeline, the labor pool, the where the workers are. We're mostly freelancers, and so that can be really hard for employees to find you. And so, where do they find you? And one of the main places over the last, I'd say, 5 or 6 or 7 years, where people really go to look for interpreter is LinkedIn, because it's designed for that. So there's lots of interpreters on Facebook, much harder to search for that or find that. So you'll find that all over the world, any kind of, if you put in any single kind of interpreting specialization or certification for those who have certification, and you're going to see thousands pop up. But Caroline, you say too, because someone who's probably done that searching on LinkedIn, to
Yeah,
find interpreters.
I mean, to be completely honest, don't tell anybody this, but before I joined Boostlingo, I didn't have much of a LinkedIn presence. But when I did join LinkedIn, I found where the interpreters go. So now I have so many connections on LinkedIn that are linguists, interpreters. It's really, I tried, like you said, with Facebook. There are Facebook groups out there. We have a Facebook group, of course, but it's not the place for professional personas to live. And so we're recommending that if you don't have a LinkedIn, after this webinar, go sign up and get one, first of all.
Absolutely. Get your headshot and then go get your LinkedIn. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Well, and that's a really great point that you said about professional personas. You do behave differently on LinkedIn. You're coming as your professional persona, right? So this is what we're talking about whenever we think about LinkedIn for networking. This is where you're building your business rather than acting like a person, which is, can be a little combination of both. But you can comment on articles that are relevant to the industry, put your name out there whenever people are talking about a hot topic, right? Share articles and grow your following that way. It's just a way for whenever an LSE is looking, they've moved past that. Okay, I want to look into this person more. The resume was great. They can see that you're involved in the industry. They can see that you know people. They can look at your connections. They can even see your certifications. So they see you as, a full-rounded candidate by finding you on LinkedIn. Anything else you guys want to add here?
The only thing I would say is that LinkedIn and Twitter to some degree actually are a great place for kind of curated news about the profession. So if you're a professional, we need to be in the habit of actually reading about our profession. And LinkedIn, you can search it through by hashtags or just by the people you follow, and that feed will give you a lot of articles that you're not going to see on a Google News search or on your regular news app where you might be reading state or international, or national news. So to me, I think it's in addition to the networking, it's actually a way that you can kind of track what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. It's where I really learned about the industry and found a lot that I wouldn't have been able to find just from a Google search. So it's really a great place to go and to learn. I think for the sake of time, we're probably going to skip over this, but we will include links to some really great LinkedIn profiles of people within the industry. I encourage you to go and look at these whenever we send out the slides for today. Get ideas from them, right? What are they including on their page? You can totally copycat. All of my great ideas are copycats from people who are doing cool and amazing things. So feel free to look at them and go ahead and include it on there.
Yep.
And there's other ways to be found. We've touched on agencies looking on LinkedIn. A lot of them are there, and that's how they're going to search and find you, right? So you want to make sure that what they find is great. But Catherine actually brought this to me, the one-page web page. Catherine, what does this look like if you're thinking about it as an interpreter?
It can be it's like your resume to some degree, except you can put more information on, because at this point it's easy to sign up with a company like GoDaddy or Wix or WordPress or any number of these. You can have a free account and you can actually generate a one-page web page or even a several-page web page. It's just if you do it for free, you're going to have to accept a certain level of advertising. But this is
Yeah.
where you can, you know, put up a professional photo if you want. You can highlight your different experiences. You can click to a longer resume if you want. I mean, but it really is a chance to do something visually appealing and professional and modern that someone can go look at and say, okay, this person is a serious professional. And you know, I know that's kind of at the very end, but part of what we're getting at here, because this is a freelance field, it's very easy for interpreters to just think, oh, I'm just Catherine Allen, I'm just Caroline, and they're hiring me to do this thing. But no, actually, you are Catherine Allen business, Caroline Reamer business. We are one person businesses, and more language service companies want to be able to show that so they can prove that you're not an employee. They want to show that, hey, no, we're contracting with them. They are in charge of their own business life. So doing a website is not complicated. You don't have to know HTML. You know, it's pretty, they've got it pretty, you know, follow the dots at this point. And we are linking to a blog post that I think outlines, you know, some of the best places you can go and explore, you know, to do it. But it's an easy way to have a professional persona. But if you don't do a blog post, you can also just have a very built out LinkedIn profile as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of what you are able to add on LinkedIn, you would want on that one page web page as well. So it can have some crossover for sure. And yeah, like Catherine said, this will have a list of the 20 best companies that you can make free one page web pages with, and all of them will have easy to use templates that you can just plug writing into, plug copy into. You do not have to be super technically savvy to get this up, but it will make you look really technically savvy to people who are looking at you as a potential employee. And then, Caroline, we have other social media or marketplace profiles. Are there any that you want to recommend to
Yeah,
people?
yeah, and you guys are probably already familiar, but pros.com has a wide marketplace of linguists. So if you're on that one, you'll be sure to be seen in terms of being a translator or interpreter, because LSPs subscribe to that, and so they look there for freelancers. And then in terms of other like registries, I don't know if we mentioned this yet, but I think um, becoming or staying part of professional associations, so you can be on their registry, is also a huge one.
Yeah.
We'll touch more on that in a second. I think I jumped ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's our next slide. Well, you transitioned perfectly. And as far as with social media, especially like LinkedIn and Facebook, one of the ways that you can get a lot of out of that social media is becoming a part of groups. So for example, we have Boostlingo's groups for our interpreters. On LinkedIn, a lot of professional associations, which we'll touch on in a second, will have their own groups that you can join. So it basically shrinks the amount of people that are on the network for you to interact with, and can give you a really concentrated pool of people to be speaking to and learning from.
And that learning from part is the part I also want to, it's like the two sides of a coin. It can help you be visible, but you can also find your group of linguists. How do I handle this translation? What do I do for this interpreting? How should I approach this agency? And you've got the aggregated knowledge of your colleagues that are shared out. That is sort of the upside. For all the bad in social media, these are the strengths on a professional level with social media.
Absolutely. And we're going to touch on professional associations. Joining these is a great way to kind of super inject your career, right? Catherine, you've listed some here. Are there any that you really want to touch on?
No, I mean, I think that the important thing is to actually join an association, and whatever is most relevant to you. If you're in healthcare interpreting, and you know, I'd definitely go try out the National Council on Interpreting Healthcare. But there are many regional interpreter and translator associations that are either for general for everybody, or are focused specifically on legal or medical, right? Mostly in this point. But I don't really care which one or what it is. I just want everybody to join one and participate in some way at whatever level, because this is a networked by referral career still, and this is what's going to help you move along. Yeah.
Right. And like we said before, having your name in those databases opens up so many doors. Also, I mean, obviously, depending on the climate of conferences, virtual or hybrid or whatever, also highly recommend you to attend conferences and in person, especially. Catherine and I will be at the ATA conference in LA in October, so hopefully we'll see some of you there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I just think on a personal note, a lot of us are working remote these days, a lot of, especially our virtual interpreters, and being a part of these groups can give you a network of people that you are talking to, learning from, and engaging with. So it's both, you know, a personal move and a professional move to have people who with shared interests that you're joining online. Finish up with some communication best practices. Oh no. Okay. Sorry, I forgot to change the title of this, but this just, it says communication best practices. It's a communication best practice to use the wrong header. Understanding email ethics and responsiveness. And so this is another one that's US specific. A lot of what we're talking about is US specific, but adapt it to whatever your target audience is as well. Whether these make sense or there's some new ones you have to learn. Email address. Have a professional email address. I gave this example of Rough Rider because I have seen that in a couple of things that I've gotten as a professional. It does not make me want to reach back out to you as a person. Getting your name or your business persona. So, for example, like Catherine has Words Across Borders. If you have your own business name, trying to get that into whatever your email is a really good practice. It helps people remember you. Gmail is associated with business and tech savvy in the US. There are others that are totally fine, but just kind of as a leg up, people really like Gmail here. And so it denotes kind of an in crowd vibe whenever you see it. Ways to address your email and responsiveness. Is there anything specific, Catherine, that you want to ward people off of with email and responsiveness?
A couple of things, and the other thing in terms of the Gmail as well. For me, it's more it's Gmail, but it's also, but if also you can just have your own name if you do have your own little mini business and you get your own
Mm.
.com, .org, .net. That's actually the top, right? That's the
Yeah,
top, and then but
that's the
most
top tier for
individuals
sure.
we do end up with some kind of service like this, and there are many of them all around the world. Obviously, I think for me it's more the what's in the front. Is it the Rough Rider, or does it some kind of indicate to some degree what you're trying to communicate professionally? And I mean, Caroline can talk to this too, but for me, man, I get a lot of people reach out to me, and of course we live off of off of email. Like, always say hello and the name. Don't have it go, be very, be like, do the most important things up top and be as brief as you can, at least for opening emails, especially if you're trying to reach out to somebody unknown and you're asking them for some kind of support or help. Like, be very specific. I get a lot of emails that will say, "Hi, I want to become an interpreter. Can you tell me what I should do?" And I mean, and I always have to, take the time to email back and say, "What's your language pair? Where do you live? What kind of
Mhm.
Right.
interpreting are you trying to do?" So, like, do this stuff, bring that stuff in ahead of time, especially when you're reaching out to potential employees or for people to mentor you. Be specific, have it, offer something in return if you can, right? I mean, those are some of my basic things. But Caroline, what would you say?
I mean, same to reiterate. I mean, just be courteous. Think, you're not just sending an email out into the ether. This is going to reach a real human. So I always try to remember that when I'm feeling upset about something specifically before sending an email, just because I know it feels very impersonal, but the person receiving that on the other end, it doesn't matter who they are. They're gonna read it and they're gonna want to respond, and they are gonna want to help, with whatever you've requested. It's just, are you making it easier for them to do so or not? And are you making yourself, you know, portraying yourself as a professional? I've gotten, as well, lots of emails from linguists or interpreters, just all caps, because I know they're trying to get my attention, but that's not. I'm telling you, that's not the way to go. Just because that does not get someone's attention, that just
In a
makes them think
positive
it's,
way. Yeah, it gets
yeah,
their attention in a negative way. Yeah.
Right,
absolutely.
exactly.
Awesome. And don't ask Googleable questions, right? We are not Google. Ask questions that only the person you are emailing would know the answer to, right? That's what you're trying to email them for. That's what will get their attention to. And then business professional can vary from country to country. So just kind of understand the norms, especially whenever you're on video calls. Awesome. And we're going to finish up. We're almost right on time. I think we're going to go until about 5 minutes over. So if you can hang out, please do. We're thinking about legislation trends, Catherine. Can you explain? We're talking a lot about California here, so can you kind of explain the background?
Oh, I think that we'll definitely have to do another webinar in this, but for many of you may have been paying attention to the fact that there's just a lot of churn and turmoil in this country right now around who should be classified as an employee and who should be classified as a freelance interpreter. And there's been laws in several states, and most notably California with the AB5 law that passed a few years ago, that actually made it illegal for interpreters to work as it basically classified every single interpreter as an employee, and it was an inadvertent side effect, of the law, which is really targeting supporting Uber drivers and UPS drivers who are really being exploited. So it took a big fight to get that fixed, and in that fix, if you want to work in California as an independent contractor, you actually have to show that you have a business presence. And we've been trying to get that message out, but also the message out that it's not hard. All of these things that we've talked about today are basically achievable completely free. You can have a free LinkedIn profile. You can have somebody take a nice picture of you with a camera you already own. You can go to a website and set up a free website. I mean, the most of the stuff you can do almost free. It's just a matter of finding templates and putting the time and investment into it. And so I guess I would just say increasingly, the trend is that language service companies really want to hire one-person businesses, and it's not hard to show yourself as a one-person business. But it is definitely it's definitely where the trend is going. So I guess that's all. It's a long topic, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we could have an entire webinar just on that, and I think we probably will. But yeah, we've tried to make it as transparent as possible, the process of becoming that professional online. Your resume gets you in the door, but your professional persona is what gets you the job, right? And so having that next step is going to distinguish you from other applicants. Caroline, is there anything you would like to add on this slide?
I think just to reiterate, we live in an online world. So having a professional persona online is so important, especially when it comes to remote interpreting. So I think we've had some really great pearls of wisdom on this webinar, and apologies for the snafus in the beginning. But we're always happy to be here with you, and please do reach out if you have any topic requests or any questions. lad@boostlingo.com, and we will get back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will be sending out the slides from this presentation to everybody who registered for the event. So be on the lookout for those, as well as a couple other notes from the team. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, and especially for those of you who stayed on for the extra little bit of time. We really appreciate you coming, and we're looking forward to catching you at the next one.
Right. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Maddie, for hosting.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody. Bye.